sent me this video link this week that was titled, I think, "The Worst Interview That Was Ever Recorded on Fox News." And I heard it went viral, so maybe a lot of you have seen that video, which is great. It saves me some time. No, but many of you might have not seen the video. So, well, the interview was, it's this woman journalist at Fox News that, for some reason, had invited a scholar to come and talk about the book he had just read. Now, we learned through the interview eventually that this man, this scholar, has been a scholar and a student and a teacher, a professor actually, a PhD of comparative religions. That he has written many books on different aspects of the different Abrahamic faiths, and even beyond that, he's very well known in his field. He's very bright, and we also learned from his background that he's born Christian, married a Christian woman, even has a brother-in-law, we learned, that is an evangelical priest. And, however, as far as that woman interviewing him was concerned, he had one major flaw. And the one major flaw, it was hard to find, but the one major flaw this young man had was that along the way, he had converted to Islam. And he was there to talk about a book he had just written that was just published on the life of Jesus and the time of Jesus' life 2,000 years ago in the land of Israel, which was actually under Roman rule and was called Palestine. And for her, that disqualified him from having even written the book. She couldn't fathom why a Muslim person would dare to write a book on Jesus. Clearly, it was a book that was incendiary. It was a book that clearly was against Jesus. She had not read the book. It was very clear from the interview. But how dare he, as a Muslim, could ever write a book on Jesus? And the whole interview, which the video is about 10 minutes, there is not a moment where he actually is able to talk about what the book is about. Because she keeps coming back to, how dare you, who are you to write as a Muslim person? You cannot write a book on Jesus. She actually goes so far as to say that it would be as if a Democrat would write a book on Reagan. What an abomination! She didn't say that, it was my comment. And he very calmly, all the way through, he was such a gentle soul. All the way through, we tried to bring it back to, look, I'm a scholar. I've been doing this for decades. I've been studying the life of Jesus for 20 years. The book that I'm writing is a scholarly book. It's backed up by hundreds of notes at the end of the book that are taken from sources all over the world. This is actually a book that is not an attack on anything, but an explanation of understanding the life of Jesus based on the circumstances that we've learned of what life was like in that time, in that place. And so he says to her, he wouldn't be like a Democrat writing a book on Reagan. And if he were, he would be a Democrat that has studied Reagan for the last 20 years. That has read everything that ever was written on Reagan. That is actually a master and a teacher of Reagan and Reagan's legacy and Reagan's life. And he would have written a book with hundreds of quotes from other works, the world over, to explain what the life of Reagan was like. That would be a good comparison to make. And she would not have it. She kept coming back and quoting some sources of people that were attacking him, how dare he as a Muslim to do what he did. And that was the whole of her worldview. And she could never let go. She could never let go. And so after a few minutes of upset, watching the video, of real sadness, in fact, it was real sadness in watching that interaction. How low the debate has come to on national TV. But then I started to think, okay, where is that in my life? Where is that in me? How and where do I show up like this? With this kind of inflexibility. And as I was thinking about it, and I think it's true not just for me personally, but for a lot of us in the Jewish community, this kind of inflexibility, this kind of place of stuckness happens around national conversations around Israel. And I find myself becoming really defensive when that topic comes up. You know, I see people debating about what Israel is doing and what Israel is about on TV, and, you know, perhaps because I lived there for many, many years, because I have a sense that I know it from inside, and who dare are these people, you know, talking about a land they've probably never been at, and so I have all of those stuff that's coming up, you know, as I hear that. And then they bring in, you know, the scholars and the experts on the Middle East, you know, from that university or this university. And it becomes really hard for me when those experts are actually Muslims. How dare they, then I find myself thinking, talk about Israel. Because of course they must be biased, without seeing my own bias in what I'm saying. And I'm not the only one. I'm sure there are places in your life where that happens to you. We all have those. Either we want to think of ourselves as not that. We have those dark places, those places of stuckness, of inflexibility, when we know the truth and we can hear, even experts with degrees and PhDs. So the question is, how do we heal through that? How do we heal ourselves in this process? How do we become more able to, in every circumstance, to simply hear and simply be present to what the other is offering? And then I open this restore portion, and right there in the first few verses, I found that maybe not an answer, but some tools to help us. So I'm going to read just the first few verses. The Torah portion is Re'eh. Re'eh means see. And actually that's the first word of the Torah portion. It starts with see, exclamation point. See. I place before you today a blessing and a curse. The blessing, if you hearken to the path of mitzvot, of the eternal one your God, that I enjoined upon you today. And the curse, if you do not hearken to the path of mitzvot, of the eternal one your God, and turn aside from the way that I enjoin upon you today. I place before you a blessing and a curse. So we like the first part. God is placing the blessing before us. Yes. But why does she have to also put in a curse? We don't want the curses. Why should she put curses in front of us? What have we done? Now, note that in the quote, the blessings and the curses only happens if we don't, follow the path of mitzvot. If we do, find blessings. If we don't, curses. So the question is, okay, what is the path of mitzvot? What is mitzvot? A lot of us were not thinking that the word mitzvah means good deed. And that's fine, and that's good, but it's a little bit limited. If you look at it from the Aramaic root of the word, mitzvah actually means connectedness. Mitzvah actually means connection. And the spiritual path of mitzvot is a spiritual practice that helps us connect or reconnect the divine within ourselves, to the source with a capital S that is at the center of our being, to the beingness that we are, the isness that is our birthright, our inheritance. So that's the path of mitzvot. And we follow the path of mitzvot, the Torah then says, then you'll have blessings. And if you don't, curses. And that's fine, but it's still not quite there yet. Because what we are missing is yet a deeper layer. And the deeper layer I find is that this is not actually talking about the outside world and the actions we will be taking on the outside. This is talking about what would inherently awaken within us, were we to follow that path from within. It's an awakening of a different kind of awareness that would open up within us, where we to practice the path of mitzvot, the path of connectedness, of reconnecting. Let me explain. Often when we neglect the spiritual aspect of ourselves, when we neglect to practice spirituality, we find ourselves mired in the world of the mind. We suddenly are brought into this place of stuckness, of the ego roller coaster. When life becomes so chaotic. We find that as we enter into this kind of places, of narrow places, that in fact, how do I say that? I guess I just step into that place. That place of wanting what is to be different than it is. Because the space of the ego is about dissatisfaction. The ego is never satisfied with what is. So I was going to go in one way, and then I didn't like that. So I traced my thoughts back and said, I want to go that way, and that wasn't good enough. So I decided to tell you what was going on. And I found that my ego was becoming dissatisfied. And that is exactly what the ego does. The ego is always dissatisfied with whatever is happening in the moment. That's the nature of the ego. That's why our lives are so chaotic, in fact. Because we are unable to open up and say yes. We start with saying no. So suddenly the ego is having this perspective, or is falling into this kind of rut where we can't have what is in front of us. We can't be with what is. What we want is to be taken care of. We want to be satisfied. We want our expectations to be met. Right? That's what the ego always wants. And it's always in searching the next thing where perhaps then my expectations can be met. Maybe it's another relationship. Maybe it's another people. Maybe it's another community. Maybe it's another job. There's always this search for something else. So that ego looks at life and looks at the world and only sees disasters, only sees terrible things, only sees darkness and fear. What he does is that it's always resentful and angry at the past, because he always wants the past to have been different than it was. If only my past had been different than it was, I wouldn't be where I am today. Dang the past. Then the next thing the ego tries to do is control, manipulate the present, so that the present would fit in its expectations. It's its need of wanting what it wants but can never have. And when it's exhausting trying to manipulate and control what it can't control, then it's living in fear of the future. That's the life of the ego. And the word that is key in this, that you probably heard me say, is that that's the way the ego sees everything. That's the name of the Torah portion, see. Because it's all about how we see. It's all about how we perceive. And like I said, the ego is only going to see what's wrong, what is not and should be, what is not yet there. And it looks at itself and sees itself as broken, not big enough, not good enough, not whatever enough. But that's how the ego sees. So when we don't have a spiritual path, we fall prey to that kind of seeing more easily. So it's not that you don't have a spiritual practice, therefore you're going to live a life of curses. What I think the text is trying to tell us is when you don't have a spiritual practice, what you're going to see is curses. That's what you're going to be attuned to. That's what you're going to be attracted to. There's an expression that says that when you're a hammer, everything you see is a nail. You know what I'm trying to say here? So in the opposite, when you embrace a spiritual path and you practice some meditations, some prayers, whatever your practice, you go hiking in the woods, you listen to beautiful music, whatever your practice is, it doesn't have to be, what do they call it, organized religion. Here we practice disorganized religion. Whatever your practice, what the text is telling us is that whatever you do that is helping you move underneath the chaos of ego, slightly underneath, is where you can find space to open up. Because when you're stuck in that ego place, all you see, as I said, is a world that is in boxes, little boxes, and everything has to fit in those boxes. So for example, if you have a Muslim person writing a book on Jesus, that does not fit in those boxes. It can't happen. You can't have that. And so you become reactive. How dare you? It doesn't fit in my box. But when you go underneath the chaos, underneath the storm of the ego, when you sink a little deeper in that place of greater quietness, then your vision expands. And as your blinders fall away, your heart opens up as well. And when your heart opens up, then there's suddenly more room. You see more because you see from different perspectives. You include other points of view. You are able to step into other people's shoes and see life a little bit as they might see it. You resonate with their suffering because, believe me, the suffering is still there, the darkness is still there, the evil is still happening, but now you see it differently. You see from a place of greater compassion, of greater understanding, of greater empathy, of greater love. It's there, but you don't get attached to it. You don't react to it anymore. It doesn't suck you in again. You can simply be present to it as if you were watching, knowing that place of constriction, knowing that place of narrowness, knowing that place where the heart suddenly collapses. And you don't want that anymore. You want the spaciousness of the heart. And in that spaciousness, there's room for a Muslim to write a book on Jesus. There's room for a Muslim to write a book on Israel, on Golda Meir and Moshe Dayan. There's room for a Jewish guy to write a book on Muhammad, the prophet, on Jesus as well. There's room for everybody to write whatever they want to write. And actually, it's not that just room for it. It's welcome. It's actually encouraged. The more we can actually learn from one another. I mean, these guys spent 20 years as a Muslim to learn about Jesus. We all should do that. Can you imagine a world where we will be knowledgeable enough of each other's faith tradition? What creates warfare is ignorance. Knowledge brings peace and harmony, compassion and empathy. And that's what that quote from the Torah, I think, is telling us. yourself to a spiritual practice, really go for it. Really do it, because it will lead you to places where greater peace will awaken in your life. Where you will be able to let go of all those places of stuckness, of all those cardinal truths. When the boxes of your life will be able to get opened up. One of my teachers said, when you get to that place, it's like you are more slippery. In the sense that things come at you still. They still come at you, but they won't stick. They will just slip right through you. And you'll be able to stay centered